All right, thanks so much for joining us here on Atlanta News First Plus. Of course, we've been covering the charges against former UGA star Jalen Carter, and I want to kind of bring you the latest on that story and just talk a little bit further about it as well. So the brand new developments overnight in this case. If you weren't aware, he was at the NFL Draft Combine yesterday. At that time there was kind of cut short because he turned himself in last night at the Athens Clarke County Jail, and he's facing charges in connection to that January 15th crash which killed one of his teammates as well as a UGA staffer. The charges specifically that he's facing are of street racing and reckless driving. He wasn't in jail very long though. His booking sheet shows that he was booked into the jail at 11:33 last night and then released 16 minutes after that. And I want to show you now this video, the surveillance video from downtown Athens in the early morning hours of January 15th. This was just hours after the parade celebrating UGA's second national championship in a row. And it shows what appears to be a black Jeep and some other vehicles accelerating quickly through an intersection. Police have not confirmed that the Jeep in that video is the same one owned by the now former Bulldogs defensive tackle Jalen Carter, but they do tell us Carter was in his Jeep and that he was racing a rented Ford Expedition driven by UGA football staffer Chandler LaCroix when that Expedition crashed. And of course we know that LaCroix was killed in the crash along with UGA player Devin Willock, and 2 others were hurt. So now toxicology reports show LaCroix's blood alcohol concentration was nearly 2.5 times the legal limit at the time, and she was driving 104 miles an hour at one point. I want to share with you a 911 call. A 911 call appearing to place Jalen Carter at the scene of the crash just before police arrived.
The owner of this
Hey, you might just go ahead and yo.
is not responding to their phone. The emergency location is
Liable.
Yeah, so obviously providing a little bit of context there. And Jalen Carter released a statement saying in part, there's no question in my mind that when all the facts are known that I'll be fully exonerated of any criminal wrongdoing. So that's a look at kind of the criminal side of all this, but there's also this world of the civil side and potential lawsuits that could come out of this incident. So I want to bring in a special guest joining us this morning. This is attorney Eric Toussaint joining us. Thank you so much, Eric, for sharing your expertise and analysis. I know you actually went to UGA, but yet you say that there could potentially be liability for your alma mater. Why do you say that?
Yeah, I mean, it gives me no pleasure to say that UGA may be liable, but I mean, it's the law in Georgia and across the entire country that, you know, an employer can be held liable for the wrongful acts of its employee. And Ms. LaCroix, who was, of course, tragically killed in this incident, was a football development staff member at UGA, was driving the car 104 miles an hour, was transporting football players home from downtown Athens. I assume home. I don't know that that's a fact. And so, UGA should be concerned about its liability legally. I mean, I think they absolutely should be concerned about their moral liability here, but legally for the acts of its employee.
Yeah, I mean, it really an important point that you're raising there. What other? You're talking about the liability of UGA, but if you were an attorney representing the plaintiffs in this case, what claims would you raise? What would be kind of the legal grounds for a lawsuit?
Yeah, and I would point out there isn't any plaintiff in this case at this time. Back in January, the Willock family had indicated that they didn't have any intent to sue UGA at this point or at all, and so I haven't seen any other public reporting or information about this since that time, and so I'm not. Taking the privilege of indicating that there is a plaintiff or that they will sue. But, I think that if I was advising them, I would tell them that they should seriously consider it in that you have an employee, a simple negligence claim, right? I mean, they were driving 104 miles an hour in a vehicle rented by the University of Georgia while drunk, transporting. Their role there is to support the football team, and we're transporting football players home from downtown Athens at that time. And then additionally, and while I don't think there's no information out there at this point, you have issues of negligent entrustment, whether kind of UGA supplied this vehicle to its employee who we don't know what awareness they had of any previous driving record incidences, whether kind of transporting football players home at high speeds, possibly while under the influence of alcohol, was a regular occurrence. And so I think that if I was advising the Willick family, I would tell them that they should consider seriously bringing an action against the University of Georgia. And obviously, if I was advising the University of Georgia, I would tell them that they should enter into discussions with the Willick family to get this matter resolved, because, as any good lawyer will tell you, nothing is guaranteed in a court of law, and things could go either way. But what is guaranteed for UGA is that the longer this horrible, tragic incident remains in the public eye, the worse it is for the football team, the worse it is for the athletics department, and the worse it is for the university writ large.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, first, before we move kind of off the topic of UGA liability, I mean, anything else you want to point out with that? Because I want to ask you about other potential parties who might be liable.
Yeah, I think one thing folks might, non-legal professionals might want to point out as well, clearly she wasn't doing what was part of her job at UGA, so UGA can't be liable, right? They'll say, well, she had been drinking and she was driving 104 miles an hour, and UGA had policies against this sort of thing. In Georgia, criminal negligence, a criminal act, which, I'm not trying to cast any aspersions on Ms. LaCroix. I mean, when I was in college at UGA, I made some terrible decisions, and I feel really lucky that I didn't end up with a result like we have here. But just because someone is committing a crime doesn't absolve the employer from its liability for those actions. I mean, a classic example would be like a bar bouncer, right? If a bar bouncer, uses too much force, tosses someone out of a club, that person gets horribly injured, and that was part of their job, to throw this person out of the bar. And if they did it too aggressively and committed a crime, that doesn't absolve the bar or club or whatever from its liability for that action. And here, the question is, we would need to get more facts, and obviously that would come out if a civil matter was brought here as to what did Ms. LaCroix's supervisors know about this type of thing. Was it a common occurrence for development staff to transport players from downtown Athens home after a night of partying? And so did employers know that maybe support staff had been drinking occasionally when they were doing these types of things? It's not as cut and dry as that. And if we in civil litigation through the discovery process, we would find more information, and information, even if it proved helpful to the University of Georgia, would probably be damaging to the reputation, again, of the football program and the athletic department in the university at large.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned potential liability. You weren't talking about this case, but you were talking about, in general, just potential liability of bars and clubs and establishments like that, as it relates to incidents like this that are alcohol fueled. So I want to ask you specifically, because I have heard talk that it might be a possibility, about the liability of the bar or club where these victims were And where they were getting intoxicated before they went out and were apparently street racing in cars. What could their potential liability be in this case?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about what kind of is commonly or is known in the law as dram shop liability. I think that there's a legal aspect to everything, and then there's a practical aspect to the law, right? And so the first question I would ask in that instance would be kind of what does the potential defendant look like? What does their ability to um, pay damages look like in a scenario, and how difficult would developing the fact pattern needed to prove dram shop liability negligence in a case like this? If you were going to the trouble of bringing an action against the university, then you might consider also bringing an action against where these folks were served, but I think that would be a more difficult path. I think the university, probably to a plaintiff's lawyer, presents a more appealing target because they have significantly more to lose from a public relations perspective. And so I think there is the potential for liability there. I don't think it presents as alluring a target to a potential to a plaintiff's attorney representing the Willick family.
I also just want to ask you, because we got some questions in the newsroom about sovereign immunity and whether the plaintiffs here could successfully sue UGA, and if there's a cap on how much they could actually recover, and if it would even financially be worth it. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I haven't thought about that issue as deeply, so I hate to speculate here, but sovereign immunity usually applies when, in the instance of a government employee, is performing their duty in a manner, in a prescribed manner, in the way they ought to. But I don't think that would be UGA's saving grace here. I mean, an example I would point out is that MARTA in Atlanta is obviously a government entity, and they are have been subjected to large judgments in the past for the wrongful acts of their conductors, bus drivers, et cetera. So I don't think that sovereign immunity, while I would certainly raise it as a potential defense, you don't want to leave any stone unturned as a defense attorney. I don't think that will work for UGA in this instance.
Oh wow, that's very interesting. Okay, I'm going to share that with anyone in our newsroom who isn't watching the stream. First of all, they should be ashamed, but second of all, I'm going to play this back for them because that was definitely an issue that we talked about this morning.
And some lawyers smarter than me might come out and say that I'm dead wrong on that, but that's just how I see it. So.
Well, no, I mean. They're not lawyers. Maybe they're wannabe lawyers. They watch a lot of TV.
A lot of those on Twitter.
That's right. I mean, any other potential defendants that you could see here? Anyone who could potentially be held liable that we haven't discussed?
I mean, obviously, Ms. LaCroix herself, or at least her estate. As a plaintiff's lawyer, I don't know that I would bring that claim for a number of reasons. I mean, I am not here making any moral judgment against Janet
Nuts
Carter
and wheel locks.
or Ms. LaCroix.
So it's a new bedroom, a 4K laser TV projector, and a brand new SUV.
But
it's yours if the price is right. Elizabeth, what do you say?
I'm getting
You know what? We're getting interference.
31.
commercial feed, and so I'm hearing
31,008.
a very interesting advertisement in my ear. So as I was saying,
I'm hearing interference. I'm going to go try to address that.
as I was saying, I feel awful for Miss LaCroix, her family, the Willick family, everybody involved in this. I mean, this is going to be the type of horrific. I mean, it's just awful. And so, I think there's a lot of sympathy for Miss LaCroix, and there ought to be. She made a terrible decision, and she paid the ultimate price. And, college kids make these bad decisions all the time. And my heart goes out to her family. You could bring an action against her. I don't know that there would be significant damages there available. And at the same time, she was his friend. And, I think that it doesn't make a lot of sense. The potential liability to Jalen Carter as someone who was racing against them as alleged, maybe, but I think the big target is going to be the big entity, which is UGA, with a multi-billion-dollar endowment backing of the state. I think, and obviously, just the University of Georgia is just incentivized to the nth degree to resolve this with the Willick family. And if I had to guess, and I would think they are probably already working with the Willick family to try to make things right here. I mean, as you see, historically, I mean, just the other week, the University of Alabama had a public relations crisis on its hands that's continuing with one member of its basketball team being involved or being tangentially involved in what ultimately was a murder. And now, this UGA, the press on this, I don't think they want a long, drawn out trial that looks into, the dark corners of the athletic department. Not that I don't mean to use the word dark to imply anything nefarious is going on, but just, I think that would like this to be resolved in a way that is fair, that gets people back to thinking about the good things that UGA Athletic does, the good things the University of Georgia does for the state, and not this horrible, tragic incident.
Yeah. And anything else you want to mention with regard to kind of the civil aspect of this case?
No, whether the Willick family will ever bring a lawsuit, we can only speculate at this time. But I think it's something that we ought to be, that is important to think about, and is an angle of the story that hasn't been discussed much. I know that some of the popular narratives might be that it's just lawyers, unscrupulous lawyers coming after the UGA, but I mean, we have a young man who had a bright future in front of him, who stood to make millions and millions of dollars, likely in the NFL, whose life was cut short. And whenever something like that happens, I think that those around him deserve to possibly be compensated.
Yeah, that's a fair point, and just kind of calling up the pictures here of the victims, who we don't want to forget in all of this. So very, very sad case all around. Yeah, I mean, any final thoughts? I know you got a busy day. You're juggling several cases, I know, as always. But any other final thoughts you want to share?
No, I mean, I love the University of Georgia, and I'm a football season ticket holder and a basketball season ticket holder, and I'll be out there yelling "Go Dogs!" But I really do hope that they will consider doing right by the Willick family in regards to this matter.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, trial attorney Eric Tusink, for joining us with your insight and analysis. We really appreciate you joining us here on Atlanta News First Plus, and we look forward to hopefully calling on you again as we keep following the latest developments in this case.
Thanks so much, Joy.
Thank you. All right, and we just want to remind our viewers as well that we're going to continue to follow the latest on this UGA crash case. Again, 21-year-old Jalen Carter, former UGA football star, facing charges of street racing and reckless driving. Cut his time short at the NFL Combine yesterday, draft combine yesterday, turned himself in last night at the Athens Clark County Jail, but is now out. And we're just going to keep following how this develops. So keep it right here on Atlanta News First Plus. Have a great day.